Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Dojo Talks. Today we are going to be talking about the recently concluded Freestyle Grand Slam in Weissenhaus, Germany, as well as any more broader general topics around that tournament, the Freestyle Grand Slam, Chess 960, Fisher Random Chess, etc. We're going to talk about how the tournament went, both from a chess perspective and from a chess business perspective. I'm going to be really excited about Fisher Random Chess. Jesse is going to poo-poo it. And the most interesting thing about this show is, what is Kostya going to say about the tournament in Weissenhaus?
Yeah, I mean, well, I think the whole topic is very interesting because it's clear after this event, right? They put a lot into it. There was a lot of backing from chess.com for the event. So it's not just a Magnus project, it's now a Magnus chess.com project.
Yeah.
And clearly Magnus is all in on it. Like he's just openly saying now classical chess is more interesting if we're playing freestyle. I prefer to play freestyle chess.
Yeah.
Um,
Which,
and
just like small aside, Kostya, I wonder how long he's felt that, right? Because now he says it so clearly, and you wonder, like 1 year ago, 2 years ago, like it must have percolated at some point along the way, or was it a revelation? I wish somebody would ask him, like, when did you realize?
That would be interesting to know. But of course, he's not like the first modern player to go this route. Like I feel like Levon Aronian has been saying this stuff for years. I know,
Mhm.
like I've heard Grischuk say the same thing that he'd rather play 960 than normal chess. So I'm sure Magnus did not come up with the idea himself. He must have
No, no.
he must have heard it from, or experienced. I mean, actually, I think a lot of chess players just come to this conclusion naturally because previously I was kind of against 960. Then I got a little bit older. I started thinking about it. I'm like, actually, 960 is very cool. Like it's like very fun not to have to prepare before a round to just be able to show up
Hmm.
and just the game starts and you're playing and it's very difficult. It's actually like much harder than classical chess, but
Right.
no less fun. So obviously there's big questions about the whole thing. There's the question of what do I prefer to play personally in a classical game and what do we think fans are going to be interested in, right? It's like two completely different questions here. Because actually I'm
Yeah.
very skeptical in general that fans are into 960.
Yeah, I guess I'd like to start maybe, Kostya, um, with how you feel as a fan, let's say, like you personally, instead of what you want to play or guessing what all the fans feel like, but your personal experience of this tournament. Did you watch any part of it? And like, I know it was playing at, 4 a.m. or whatever, um, but what was your experience watching it? Like, do you feel like the games were good or the format was interesting or, anything in that direction?
Right. So as a fan, I didn't watch a lot of the event. That's mainly because these days I work a lot and so I just don't watch chess content in
Hmm.
general
Yeah.
unless it's a very important tournament like a candidates, like a world championship, like a World Cup,
Hmm.
Olympiad. I'll be following those major events like World Rapid and Blitz. But this event, like I caught a little bit of the coverage.
Right.
I didn't play through most of the games.
Right. And those
Um,
other things you mentioned, I mean, when you say you're following them, I mean, that's as work because most of them you're covering live if you're watching them, the events that are that important to you. Of the ones you mentioned, everything except World Rapid and Blitz you covered live.
Yeah. But even otherwise, they would be like too important for like if I wasn't covering them myself, I'd be watching coverage of them.
You'd be watching coverage. Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Um,
And did you
so
catch some clips of official coverage of this one, or did you pop in on
yeah.
our own channel?
Yeah, I tried to I caught a little bit of both. Like I tried to just see what was happening. So I tried to watch the main one,
Okay.
which was I mean, it's like I just feel like it's not exactly for me. It's,
Hmm.
I think they're trying to make it for like a broader audience, which is totally fine. But yeah, it's not. Although I do find it interesting, like I like watching the players. I like seeing the players, and they're very like it's a very well produced show,
Hmm.
so it's like very easy to watch. But it's not
Were
something like I
you
really want to watch for too long.
were you like not drawn into the games? Like the positions didn't speak to you or belong to you or
Honestly, yeah, no, not even a little bit. No.
yeah.
And the reason is because like I think usually if I'm interested in a chess game, it's because I feel like I can get something out of it.
Right. Exactly.
And usually a lot of times that comes from the opening, like, oh, they're playing my opening.
Exactly.
Other times it just comes from they're playing a position I could see myself having.
Right.
With 960, it's like they're never going to see this position again. I'm never going to see this
Yeah.
position again. It's like a fun, like dynamic position, basically, right?
Yeah.
It's like an interesting strategic exercise to see who can outplay each other in the opening. But again, this is as a fan. I've played some 960 events. So like when I'm playing 960, I've even like prepared some positions. I played this chess 18 event where we just had like 18 different positions.
Yeah.
And then I played chess 4, where it's just four different positions where you just keep the king and the queen and the rooks stable, and then you mix up the knights and bishops. And
Hmm.
so those positions are like very interesting, but that's like as a player.
Right. Yeah, yeah,
The
yeah.
fan,
That's why I asked
yeah.
that exact question to you, Kostya, because I was curious about that aspect of like not getting into it because you could tune into a tournament that's maybe not the world championship, not that important, but if you happen to see, just randomly, you know, Shant Sargsyan and Ivanchuk are playing some line of the King's Indian that you were studying, 6 months ago, and maybe you remember it, maybe you remember part of it, like you're just drawn in and you want to, even if it doesn't matter, it's not part of your planned day. You're like, oh, either I want to watch this or check later, like how they played this line.
Yeah, I'll download the game. Yeah, exactly.
And that's just missing here. All right, let's get Jesse's personal take. Jesse, you probably didn't watch it, but if you watched anything, do you have any thoughts?
Well, I definitely think it's a really interesting. Well, there's a couple things that I think I learned. By the way, this is our second talk really on freestyle. And I feel like, first of all, we guessed correctly the drama that was brewing between Magnus and FIDE in the
It was
last
way ahead.
freestyle talk. I think we called
Way
all
ahead.
the shots correctly. It was
Yeah,
just like we nailed exactly kind of what was going to happen, and then it all unfolded.
yeah.
But
Existential war to the death over freestyle versus classical old chess or
yeah.
whatever.
So to me, a couple interesting things have happened. So first, I feel like this event was a big test case for could this thing become successful, right? They had Magnus as the star. They had these other big name players involved. They had some money at stake that this guy's putting up, and I would say for the effort they put into it as an inaugural event, it was no. And then we did this interesting thing before where we found some numbers. We found a new chess site called Chess Watch, and they have numbers on all kinds of events. And so
Yeah.
basically, we would talk more about it, but my sense was those numbers are basically disappointing. And my guess is it'll be worse for the next event because the next event is no longer a novelty. Um,
We'll lose luster.
yeah. So, okay, that's my first takeaway.
Hmm.
Also, since we did our last talk, this guy named Stephen Sparks, I don't know, but he was responding, just, pinged me on Twitter, and I thought he said something really interesting. And he was like, this 960 thing is an elite event. And I hadn't really put it in that framework, but the more I thought about it, I was like, oh. And then the first thing that really clued it onto me as an elite event is like, can you imagine being a chess teacher? I've done a lot of teaching kids, for example. Can you imagine teaching it to kids? No. I'm not teaching them those weird castling rules and all this other. No, no, not gonna. I know no desire. So the fact that you can't teach it to kids, at least not easily, it's already a sign that it's elitist. And then it's like,
Well,
are the
hang
players
on.
like myself, like let's say random GM level, do they have a problem that there's so much theory that it's impossible to play the game? No, not at all. Is it a thing for the top? I think they overstretch how important it is. I think we saw in the last World Championship, the opening wasn't the deciding feature of the event. But in any case, um, for people, this problem with the opening preparation only affects, in a serious way, the minds of the very top. So that's an
Right.
elite problem,
But okay, but you're
right?
covering so much ground. The
Okay.
point about can you teach it to kids? I mean, there are audiences for, basketball and F1 racing and all sorts of things that you couldn't have little kids do, right? And little kids do things like play with like bumper cars at a fair,
Hmm.
or they have the ball sitting on a post so they can just knock it off the top, right? Instead of
Yeah.
hitting a home run from a 90-mile-an-hour pitch, right? Like
Right.
there's kid versions and ways of getting into things, right?
Yeah.
Before you're dunking on a 10-foot hoop. And that doesn't mean that nobody watches those things, right? So it's perfectly possible to have something that is for the elites as a competition, but is still a spectator sport for the masses, and where you have to make simpler versions for other people
I was thinking about that too,
to
David. And
participate in.
my sense is like, let's say you're a football fan, like either kind of football, right? American
Right.
football or European football, or you are a rugby fan or something,
Yeah.
and you have played the game a little bit yourself. What you are going to want to see is you're not going to want to see like the goalposts moved around, for example. You're not going to see the structure of the pitch changed. You're going to want it to look like what you've experienced. You have a visceral relationship to the game you've played, and you want to see that reflected in the struggle of these superstars. But then when you look at these weird positions and you can't even understand the castling rules, it's like, oh no. I watched a little bit of your stream and there was an absurd castle that Keimer did. And I was like, oh my God, where did that come from? I was like blown away by it. I was like, oh no, that's too much for me. Get that off of me. I can't
So
take it.
okay, the castling rules are, I don't know, it's not that bad. Like honestly, like it's the same castling rules as in normal chess,
Mhm.
Yeah.
except the king and rook start in different places than we're used to. But all the rules are the same. You can't castle through check, you can't castle out of check.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I mean,
King
if
cannot
Jesse
move
could
through an
make
attack
GM, I'm
square.
sure he can figure out this castling rule
And the king ends up on C1 or on G1 as usual, right? It's
as
like
usual.
it's not that
Yeah.
hard.
Keimer's king
Not
was
that
like
hard.
on B8 and his rook was on A8 or something absurd. And
Right.
he castled long
They
and my
split
mind just
over.
blew up, dude.
His king moved to C8 and his rook moved to
Yeah,
D8
and I
as
was like,
You gotta
usual.
oh
play a
my
couple games,
God.
Jesse. You'll get used to it. Like it's
What,
not.
where did you think his king and rook would end up?
I have no idea, dude. I was just watching that mess and I was like, I have no
Well,
idea
like
what's going on here.
as I sometimes say to my kids when they come in and they're like, "Dad, there's like a piece of paper on the floor between me and the thing I'm trying to get to." I'm like, "Well, do you have any idea how to get to the thing anyway? Do you have any
Uh-huh.
strategy, any guess as to what the solution might be here?"
Hmm.
I mean, Jesse, what like king on B8, rook on A8, and they say, "Okay, let's castle queenside." Where would you guess? Give us a couple options.
I guess. No, I'm not debating you that I can't figure it out eventually, right?
Okay.
But I'm just trying to tell you that it's an elitist event because players can't identify their own struggle with what they're seeing on the board
Right.
because you
And the
can't
World
teach it.
Series is an elite event, and the Super Bowl is an elite event, and the finals of the French Open are an
No,
elite
no,
event.
no, I totally disagree. The Super Bowl, great example of a visceral experience where people enjoy seeing other people getting hit. That's what they love about that thing. And quick time out here. Did you know that the dojo is an incredible site with tactics, a database, a community of people trying to improve, a training program? All of this is going on at our site. So go check it out. ChessDojo.club. Hit the link in the description. Most of us actually haven't played American football. It's one of the interesting things to talk about, actually, because that's a very popular event where the fans haven't necessarily played themselves. They know the rules or a lot of them know the rules. Whereas for chess, it's mostly players who have at some level played the game themselves, right?
Yeah, and
That's what we're
honestly,
seeing.
Jesse, like in terms of people watching football, there might be more rules they don't know than you don't know when you're watching
Uh-huh.
Fisher Random
Football
Chess,
rules are
right?
pretty
Like
weird. Yeah.
the details about timeouts and if you go out
Yeah.
the sideline, or if you, I don't know. I'm sure there's rules, I don't even understand offsides in soccer, and I'm sure soccer is like doesn't have the most complicated rules, and I've played it
Uh-huh.
on a field with my friends, and there are
Yeah.
rules I surely don't know.
Right. Right.
How they figure out how much extra time there is, like when people know when the game ends. I can't even tell when a soccer game is over, Jesse.
Uh-huh.
Like the time's just ticking. It's not ticking down, it's ticking up. And
I
then
think the refs just pick a number at
you
random. I
you
really
don't you don't know if the players have like 3 minutes left to score or 10 minutes left to score. But that sport is super popular around the world. I don't know if anyone knows when the game is even gonna end.
there's some
David,
kind
I
of
think
thing
there's a
where
little
there's
piece
like
of paper in between you and your goal, and you just need to figure it out, buddy.
So you know that much, Jesse? You know
Well,
when a
yeah,
game is going to
that's
end in
not that
soccer?
complicated with this.
you know what? I bet I know how I would be able to figure that out.
Yeah.
Yeah. I bet I know a
Okay.
couple ways actually.
Okay, but let me just say we can talk. I want to just introduce another interesting development, and we can talk about whatever you.
Wait, I wanted to add to
Oh,
that though.
okay.
So I definitely don't agree with Jesse that you can't teach 960 to kids. That's ridiculous. Kids love variance. They'd be all for it. But I
They
do
play
agree
atomic
that
chess. They'll figure out where the
um,
king castles.
but it is definitely a very elitist thing.
Yeah.
I mean, Magnus himself has said like he feels like it's only for the top players that should be playing 960. Everyone else should be playing normal chess. So by definition, it's like an elitist thing. The question is like, is that a bad thing or not? I think elitist has like this kind of negative connotation, but the
Mhm.
elite players are elite. It's like there's a difference between them and us. They're not like us. So it's like okay,
Yeah. There's
so
such
they
a
get
big
to play.
difference, Coach, to just those two extra letters, right? Elite versus elitist. Like one sounds super good, the other sounds super bad, and they're talking about the same thing.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I don't think it's inherently bad that it's like an elitist idea or that only the elite players would play this variant and then others wouldn't. But it does feel like a very, very difficult pill to swallow. I think at this point, the only thing the 960 folks can really fight for is to just have 960 be like as respected as like a World Rapid and Blitz championship. But I have a
Mhm.
very hard time seeing how it's ever gonna challenge classical chess.
Right.
Right.
Just like too much history baked into classical.
Yeah. Should we talk a little bit about the numbers briefly? Like the actual data?
Sure, bring it
Because
up.
we all come into this with, sort of some assumptions and some biases and some, you know, hopes for or against things or how we want the chess world to look at. So Jesse found this amazing website, chesswatch.com. And for anyone who's interested in, winning an argument about this kind of stuff or making a good comment on YouTube,
Uh,
like you better come armed now because this this is where the data's at. You can't come in and just throw random pebbles at us in the YouTube comments. You're gonna have to come armed. And on this website, you can see uh, a kind of viewership totals by tournament across different platforms, and they know how many people were watching on ChessBase India and how many people on chess.com and how many people on chess.com India and blah, 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 right? And they know peak viewers and total hours watched and airtime and average viewers, etc., right? So there's all this information. And so I thought that we should compare three very recent events. um, Jesse, I think, is not interested in any of the three because he is against elitism, but he is such an elitist that there's only like two events per year that are good enough for him. So he'll say all three of them are uninteresting, but I think these make a good comparison, and maybe Kostya will mildly agree or something. But I'm looking at Tata Steel, the most recent classical super tournament, the freestyle Grand Slam in Weissenhaus,
Mhm.
and the Champions Chess Tour Chessable Masters, which is sort of this flagship rapid and blitz event for chess.com, formerly for Play Magnus. And looking at these, I see fairly close numbers across the three. Peak viewers for the Freestyle Grand Slam is 112,000, for Tata Steel is 125,000, and for the Champions Chess Tour is 111,000. And then average viewers for Freestyle 46,000, Tata Steel 37,000, and Champions Chess Tour 34,000. And then you get the total hours watched, and you get 2 million for Freestyle, which was a few days shorter than Tata Steel. So Tata Steel comes in at 3 million total hours watched, and Champions Chess Tour, a rapid event that only lasts like 5 days, was the shortest event and comes in with 756,000 total hours watched online. So to me, the interest level just off of those numbers, it feels like it's in the same ballpark. Not one of these events is standing out head or shoulders above the other two
Mhm. Mhm.
off of that data.
So is that a win for freestyle or or no?
Uh, you want me
Because
to
it seems like their
answer?
numbers were decent. In fact, I'm seeing their average viewers were higher than the other two events.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's pretty good.
Yeah, that average viewer number looks very good. That's their best category is a 10,000 advantage in average viewers.
I felt it was, well, we'll see. I mean, we'll be following this with the next event, but for an inaugural event where they had so much publicity around it and were pushing it so hard, they had the drama behind it as well, that it would basically be the same as Tata Steel, right? Uh, Big
Mhm.
disappointment. Now, hours watched is much bigger for Tata Steel, by the way. Um, and
Much
Right,
longer event.
because it's longer, Jesse, right? Mainly because
oh,
it's
okay.
longer. Yeah.
But what I want to stress is um, that I don't. Yeah, to me, I mean, do we think they're going to get this same level the next time? Very doubtful. Very doubtful, right?
Yeah, I feel like it would be useful if we knew if they had bigger numbers at the beginning or the end of their event, right? Because
Hmm.
Jesse's
Okay.
narrative is they've got novelty, so it'll fall off.
Hmm.
Potentially, if you were starting up something new yourself, you might also have this idea like, okay, this is my starting point and I'm going to grow from here, right? I'm building, I've got more time
Hmm.
to build. So it'd be curious to know if their viewership was falling off during the tournament as people were like, yeah, I've seen it, nah. Or if people were like, ooh, I'm really taken by the story of what's happening here, seeing, Vincent Kamer and Javokir Sindarov go up against Magnus and Fabi, fairly successfully. And, maybe people were watching more and more towards the end to see who would triumph.
And for actually, I just want to. It's interesting to contrast it with Tata because I'm also the problem with Tata as a fan. I didn't watch Tata either. Is
Yeah.
great event, great for the players. I would love to play an event like that. But the
Hmm.
problem with Tata Steel is it's very hard to see what's at stake. Like for example, the there's this the FIDE circuit tour, right? So there's points available for that, but it's very hard for us fans. We've talked about this to understand how much points and who's in the lead and all that. So it's very hard as you're watching it to gauge what's at stake for that. There's money at stake, but the fans don't really, I don't know, it's not that interesting, right? So it's hard for Tata Steel unless you're just watching the chess. It's hard to be like, okay, there's something at stake here, and this is something amazing. I'm watching for it, right?
Well, I mean, they're trying to win one of the biggest tournaments in chess. It would be like somebody's playing the French Open and you're like, what's at stake? They're trying to win the
Well,
French Open, right?
okay, just let's use that as a comparison. So, like, I'm not a big tennis person, right? But they have
Okay.
those four Grand Slams plus what's interesting about tennis, we've talked about this before, is they have a world number one, which is based on your recent results, right?
Right.
Whereas ours is just going to move so incrementally. I do think it's maybe the most interesting thing about a big event like that is people's ratings move, right?
Hmm.
Like
I
Fabi
think
lost a
Tata
lot.
Steel's a bad example because that tournament has so much history. I mean, like Waikanze, and then like people always
Mm-hmm.
count like number of Waikanze victories. And
Right.
actually, as a fan, I rooted for Anish Giri to win that tournament for years and years and years. And I was
Yeah.
so happy when he finally won because it's such a nice thing. He wins like the biggest tournament on his home soil. I think a lot of people
Yeah.
were actually thrilled to see him win it.
Yeah, that's why I compared it to tennis, and we could try to compare it to another sport that you know
Well,
better,
actually, I
Jesse.
think
But
the comparison maybe that's fair. Like um the tournaments I feel is like, a lot of the just kind of like the either like the one-off tournaments that have like a bunch of big players and
Mhm.
it's just like there's like a bunch of money at stake. But then yeah, it's like maybe they're for some FIDE circuit points now, but like that's kind of it,
Hmm. But to
in
me,
terms
this one's kind of like that. The reason I first went to tennis in my mind was this feels like a grand slam to me, right? It's like the
Hmm.
kind of thing where, like, one of the things they do in tennis, Jesse, is they count how many total grand slams somebody has won, right? Which is
Right.
how many times they've won one of the four biggest tournaments of the year. And like if chess doesn't have an official, these are the four biggest tournaments of the year, and they've tried with grand circuits and grand chess tours and stuff to maybe do that, but they mixed rapid and blitz and classical, and it didn't. And it takes history, right? Like you have to successfully run the thing. The longer you run it, the more it kind of has that weight, right? Where you're like, oh yeah, the French Open's been there for 60 years. I definitely believe that's a grand slam, right?
Hmm.
Um, so Wake on Zay has been there for a really long time. And if there were a Grand Slam in chess, if there were these are the top tournaments, it'd be like, oh, how many times has Magnus won Wake on Zay versus how many times has Kasparov won it, right? If you wanted to do some data when you try and guess who's the greatest of all time and get it wrong, you could use data and you could say, oh, this guy won this many major tournaments, this guy didn't. They used to have
Hmm.
category 18, 19, 20 and stuff. Now they're all kind of category infinity.
Yeah. So I would say for myself as a fan, what's interesting about Chess Watch is I'm on basically what I watch is what everyone else watches. You go number one of all time is the 24 FIDE World Championship. Me and David were there basically every hour of that event. Boom, boom,
Yeah.
boom. Amazing event. Then it goes FIDE World Championship 21, 23, the candidates 24, and so on. The only exception there is I was not interested in PogChamps. That was an example of an odd, one-off event. That's
Right.
number 7 on this list. But
But I'll just say,
basically,
Jesse,
yeah,
like it makes sense that there would be some events that appeal to different people, right? Like we don't
yeah,
have to be into every single event in the
yeah,
top 10. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. Um, I'm I'm interested in the Olympiad a little bit, for example, and that's not on this
hmm
list.
exactly. Yeah.
But in any case, one thing, the other problem that I see for it going forward is that I think that one of the key shifts that I've seen in the last, since we talked about this last time, is before there was an interesting question that we had with this freestyle are they going to say, is Magnus, for example, going to say, this is the real chess and this is what I am into and I am fighting for? If that narrative could be pulled off, then I can imagine freestyle being a really big thing. Until it's like the world championship of chess, then to me, I think for fans as well, it's like, well, whatever, you're just playing some little game on the side. But since we talked about it, I feel Magnus has really, with this Rogan interview in particular, though he kind of, well, basically what I would say is he said something there that I feel like we've sensed for a long time, but he hadn't really said it, which was that he doesn't have the energy to fight like he used to, right? And it's kind of a huge admission to me, anyways, as a fan. It's a kind of sad. I've been yelling at him for years. I'm like, Magnus, buddy, you got to get back in the ring. This is terrible that you left the world championship. But now it's like this admission, and there's been so many other world champions, right? When they're kind of at their end, that they're like, well, I'll do stuff like play rapid. So that's what Karpov did, for example. And they were good at rapid, for example. Magnus also likes the rapid and the blitz because it's so hard to focus for 4 hours with a guy like Gukesh who doesn't stop thinking the whole entire time, right? It's so hard to maintain that level of concentration. So instead, you come up with a side thing like Magnus has done. And the bummer for freestyle, I think, is if he's going to talk like that, and this is just some old man pursuit that he's doing, it's not, the big fight, it's not the world championship, then it's even less interesting, right?
hmm
As a fan, I'm like, well, Magnus, whatever. It's just some game you're playing, on the
I
side.
hear your perspective, Jesse. Let me try something. Unless you have a response to that, Kostya.
Yeah, no, I just want to add to it because like another thing Magnus was saying is that he was just talking about how much faster the kids are than he is. So he was just
Mhm.
openly admitting that like Faruja, Gukesh, Noterbeck, all these kids are just much faster than him in terms of calculation speed.
hmm
And I mean, he's probably right on that, but that's like, oof. Once you kind of admit that to yourself,
Yeah.
it does. Ah, man, it's just uh, time wins all battles, huh? It's
Yeah.
just
Yeah. Yeah.
like bummer.
No, it's a big deal. Normally, you try to hide that as long as you can, but Magnus saying that and Nakamura was like in clear, open,
Mm.
frustration mode during the same event, right? Just
Mhm.
saying like, yeah, I don't got it anymore, kind of like the thing that you never want to let your opponents know. Um, but let me try something for you. Like I think that one of the things that makes chess events interesting is kind of the stories around them, the players you
Yeah.
follow.
Mhm.
As Jesse says, what's at stake, but like what Kostya was saying with like following Anish Giri for years, he's a top player who's maybe not going to become world champion. So can he win the Grand Slam in his home country, so to speak, right? These are like cool stories. And we are maybe towards the end of the Magnus era, right?
Yeah.
Sort of in the like closing years. And there's an extremely strong crop of teenagers coming up behind him, right? Which
Mhm.
is Abdusatorov, Eric Geisy, Gukesh, Prague, maybe Kamer,
Mhm.
right? So there's an interesting question about Magnus being dethroned. We don't get to see the, 14 game or 24 game epic match between him and one of the kids to see if he gets dethroned, right? Obviously,
Mhm.
that's how Jesse would want the drama to play
Yeah.
itself out, right? But if you want to see the end of the Magnus era, if you want to watch that sun set, right, and see, does it scorch anybody on its way down? And what does it take to finally drag him down, kicking and screaming? How many Lilliputians, you know? The place you're going to be able to watch it is actually this Grand Slam chess tour, right? I
Mhm.
mean, unless
Mhm.
you think it's, some blitz games between him and Faruja in an esports cup, which might be somebody else's cup of tea. But I would argue that we're going to see it most clearly in this freestyle chess tour. And, he's going to be playing classical two-game matches against these guys all year long.
And actually,
You
David, why
know,
don't we just give us some information? What does it look
let
like for the
let let
rest of
me
the
tell
year?
you how it played out this time if you like.
Okay.
Um, so uh they play 3 rounds of these matches, right? So they've got 8 players who are seeded. They go quarterfinals, semifinals, finals, right? So here's Magnus's story from this tournament. He comes in the first round and he gets paired with Noderbek Abdusatorov. Very dangerous opponent who has, beaten him in classical chess before. And one of these, top 3 or 4 people who might be able to take him out. What's it going to look like? Magnus goes up against him in the first round, and with white in the first game, he just torches the guy. I mean, he plays a brilliant opening idea, offering a pawn sack, and the whole point of it is to is to bring his queen out first. The whole point is to develop his queen instead of one of his other pieces, Jesse.
Mhm.
And he transfers the queen from the center over to the queen side, weakens the guy's king by having his queen on the side of the board with the opponent's king, starts a mating attack, finishes it off. It's a beautiful game. Checkmates him in about 22 moves. Brutal. What a blow. The next game, Abdusatorov has white. They have like a crazy fighting opening. Abdusatorov sacks a pawn to try and, get some chances against Magnus to avoid a more simple position. Magnus consolidates the pawn and grinds him down and beats him in the rook ending, even though he only needs a draw. Great endgame play by Magnus. He wins the match 2-0. Wow, there goes one challenger. Dismissed. Boom. Next round, he goes up against Vincent Keimer. Vincent Keimer was kind of an underdog in this tournament in that basically the other 8 players pretty much are, in the top 10 in the world. And Keimer's like number 25 or something at the time.
Mhm.
So he goes up against Keimer and um, he gets a bad opening in his first game as black, but then he starts fighting back. And you're like, okay, chess chess 960 or Fisher Random, sometimes you don't know sometimes you make a mistake in the opening. It can be pretty costly. He got into a very bad King's Indian defense. No offense, Kostya, but it was a pretty bad one. He was just suffering under this space advantage, c4, d5, e4, and white could easily. Oh, and here's what makes it really bad, Kostya. Because of where the pieces are set up, his king is stuck on the queen side. So that's what makes it really bad, right? So it's like a King's Indian defense where black castles queen side.
Right. Yeah.
And white's just coming straight for you. It's like you don't need to be 2,800 to beat Magnus this game. You'd feel like an 1,800 would know to play c5 and then just like walk over him. Somehow Magnus keeps delaying the end. He keeps like, he makes like just the right. Magnus is great at never getting mated, right? Like he'll make like the concession to be like worse, but not mated and this and that. And then he starts drumming up counterplay on the king side like 30 moves later. And suddenly it's a 3 result position. Who knows what's going on? Kamer finds several moves that I think would blow your mind if you saw them, Jesse. Obviously, you haven't seen them, so you have to not believe me on this. But as things are getting rough, he finds like an incredible move, which is a pawn sack on the king side, which, if accepted, allows an exchange sack in the center, which is a positional exchange sack. It doesn't immediately win, but it also looks like there's a problem, like a likely refutation. There's only one tactical way for white to actually make it work out, and he's correctly calculated it. So it's brilliance on like a level 10 out of 10 level. Keeps the game going, but Magnus, sees the issue and stays in the game, and they're still going. It's like three result. What's going to happen? They're starting to get low on time, but they've got the 30-second increment. And then Kamer just like lands like a killing tactical blow suddenly, just as like 9 out of 10 people would say, well, Magnus is going to Magnus it in the end, right? Like he always comes out winning and ahead. Kamer wins it. They go to game two. Kamer defends. Magnus puts like all the pressure on him, finds like a lot of great ways to put pressure on Kamer, but he defends and defends and defends and eventually draws a pawn down endgame, like Herculean defensive task. And afterwards he says, there was never a point in this game where I thought that I was hopeless. Like he thought he was just always like still clinging to the edge of the cliff, right? Like, okay, my feet are dangling, you know, my butt's in the wind, but I'm still holding on to the edge of the cliff. So epic, and Magnus goes down. He loses this 2-game match, and losing the first game was not enough of a shock or whatever. Like he could not push the guy off the edge in the second game, close as it got. And then in the third match, Magnus is now playing a third place match. And he goes up against Javokir Sindarov, who has an incredible story. The guy is, the other outsider in the tournament, ranked number 33 in the world. He comes in via the qualifiers. He loses the final match in the qualifiers in Armageddon and doesn't get a spot. Vishy Anand withdraws from the tournament because of the political war with FIDE, because he's a FIDE vice president, and partly because of maybe some nasty things Magnus said about him, but we won't get too distracted by Anand's story right now. So Anand vacates his wildcard spot, and the organizers very properly give it to Sindarov, who had this heartbreaking second place in the qualifiers, even though they could have gone fishing for a bigger name. Good choice by them. Sindarov's allowed in. He's by far the outsider in this tournament, but he makes it through, tying for first place in the rapid portion. Just a sensation. What? Sindarov first place ahead of 8 of the top 10 players in the world? But okay, it's rapid. Let's see what happens. In classical, he gets past Hikaru in the first round. Then he loses to Fabi in the second round. Now he's playing Magnus in the third round in the third place match. And Magnus destroyed him. I mean, just murdered him, in the middle game, in the very first game with black. Sindarov's trying to attack Magnus's king. Magnus just centralizes the pieces, blows open the center, and boom, explodes the whole thing. Sacrifices, calculation, all that dirty stuff. Maybe he says he can't calculate as fast as the young guys, but he calculates the right moves in that game, right? And just tears the guy apart. And then the last game, he's got white, and he wins again. So he actually manages to score 4.5 out of 6, which is equal to Kamer's score, very high performance rating. So I think we both saw that Magnus still has amazing skills, but that it is possible to beat him. There are some vulnerabilities. Not every, if you throw all the pieces in the air in a random position in time trouble, they don't always land in Magnus's hands and Magnus's lap, right? So as far as, I went into the season thinking maybe Magnus will just clean them up every single event, right? Like his Champions Chess Tour, the Rapid and Blitz thing, he's won it every single year. And that took away some of the drama from the event. But here it looks like the young guys have maybe some chances.
So, boss, like, and what? There's like 4 or 5 tournaments for the rest of the year or something like that?
Yeah, there's another 4 of these top tier Grand Slams along with, qualifiers to get into them. The next one is Paris.
And I'm assuming like with, you get third place, you get X amount of points, and then the person with the most points at the end wins
the tour, yeah.
Yeah.
And they also have a system, Jesse, where every single place gets different prize money. And it's quite a lot of prize money. I know that's not like the main thing you look at in a tournament, but like third place gets more prize money than fourth place. Fifth place gets more than sixth. Seventh more than eighth, right? So the players, they're playing these 2-game matches, but they don't get knocked out. They keep playing until they're, sorted from first through eighth place.
Right.
and it's like $750,000 or so per event in prize money. So
And one interesting thing about that too, when you think about 4 or 5 events, uh, is that there's a lot of competition for those top players' time and energy, right? So, like if you imagine Fabi or Naka, I mean, I don't know. Naka, by the way, who knows if he's ever going to play again? This is he's still got this chance to make this, rating spot for the next world championship. But
Mhm.
just to use him as an example, that
he's
guy,
in Norway Chess, by the way, Jesse. As far as will we ever see him play again? He's registered for Norway Chess with Gukesh and
right, right.
Carlsen and others.
And Gukesh is just, I mean, he's 18. He's playing all the time. That
I
makes
hope
sense to
so.
me that that kid could play
Yeah.
every single event, you know. Uh, but anyways, like somebody like Fabi, I don't think should be playing that many events anyway. So there's going to be a huge amount of competition for his time
Yeah.
to be able to play these events, and obviously then some choices to be made about like, well, which do I do? And then, like you said, with Anand, it's suddenly a very
Yeah.
political and
Bobby had a
fraught situation.
Bobby had a pretty good schedule last year, in chasing that Grand FIDE circuit
Right.
tour victory, right? Like in
Mhm.
the end, he played those two opens, and he actually played as many games as Gukesh last year,
Right. No, he's playing a
in
lot.
classical
I
chess.
mean,
So he played quite a lot, Fabi.
yeah, no, he's playing in a ton.
Well, I think Magnus has still got it. And
Hmm.
even if he doesn't believe in himself, if Jesse doesn't, no one believes in Mag. I still believe in Magnus. I think he's
Yeah,
still the best blitz player in the world. I think that much is clear. Blitz and rapid,
and
best
rapid and
speed chess
classical
player in
and
the world.
classical probably.
And I would still like basically, yeah, if you have me take one player in any chess format, I'll still take Magnus, honestly, and
Yeah,
like pretty much anything.
yeah,
Because he's been on top for so long. So
The
yeah.
Norway chess, by the way, so that's
Um,
May and June of this year.
hmm
And I guess that might be the only time that Magnus and Naka even play classical chess this year. Could well be. A lot of rating points at stake there. And
yeah.
Fabi and Arjun and Gukesh are in there too, and Wei Yi. So they could lose a lot. In terms of rating points being bled, there could
Yeah.
be a lot of rating points being bled out at that event.
Yeah. I mean, that's the kind part of the drama also at Tatcha Steel, Jesse, right? Is like when all those top players are in the same event, like if you beat one of the other guys in the top three or four spots, like
Oh,
you're
yeah.
taking position against them on the rating list for the rating
Yeah,
spot and in
absolutely.
the circuit points, right? Like
Hmm. For
it's a
sure.
big deal.
Hmm.
Oh, but I can't imagine. Yeah, Magnus is gonna play a lot of classical chess, like outside of Norway. Like imagine you start taking freestyle chess like seriously, like you really get into it, and now next month all of a sudden you got to study like the Berlin again, the Petrov. You
Oh
got to look at
God.
like all these things. Like no way. There's no
Yeah.
way. Nah, he's done.
But Kosti, what I would say is like I think there will be some tension and drama. Like Magnus isn't just gonna roll through and win every single event of the freestyle tour easily, actually. Which I thought maybe would be the case when the year started, but they're kind of nipping at his heels.
And let's talk money. So Keimer won 200,000. The reason I want to bring
Yeah.
the money up is, if you're a player, it's going to be partly a monetary decision. So
Yes.
there's a lot of money at stake that this guy has put up. And then if you win the whole thing, I'm assuming there's more money, right?
Yeah. And from a certain perspective, Jesse, if somebody started an atomic chess tour, but the prizes were 10 times the freestyle chess tour, suddenly
Right.
maybe guys like Fabi wouldn't have time for classical chess, right? They'd be like, well, sorry, I gotta play these atomic events.
Uh-uh.
Have to make, $2 million per tournament instead of, 50,000.
Yeah. Gukesh won. I
Fabi
saw,
probably got like 100, 150, something like that for the freestyle second place.
oh, I can tell you what it was. Fabi got 140, Magnus
Mhm.
got 100, Sindarov
Yeah.
60, Naka 50, Nor Abdu 50, Ali Reza Gukesh 30, and poor Fedoseev 7,500. That's kind of rough. You get to last place, you get only 7,500.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's, I mean, I mean, it's a good prize fund. So as
Yeah.
long as this guy keeps shelling out the money, there's going to be a lot of temptation for these players to keep playing at it. And Fabi, in a way, is kind of released, right? Because he doesn't need to qualify anymore. I
Hmm.
think I'm
Right.
really interested in Naka, for example. Dude, I'm like, dude, you got to play those 40 games, man.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's going to play them. So just to remind fans, Naka is in second place right now on the FIDE rating list. But to qualify for the candidates, he has to play 40 games and maintain roughly that rating. So it's possible, but it's a big challenge also for his schedule.
So my argument, Jesse and Kostya, if it didn't come through clearly, my argument would be if you look at the Grand Slam Weissenhaus through the eyes of Magnus's story, or through the eyes of Kamer's story, or through the eyes of Sindarov's story, or through
Hmm.
the eyes of Naka's story, right? Which was one of getting like 5 winning endgames in a row that he couldn't win. And then just
Hmm.
like being like, I should just retire. I can't even win a game, right? Like,
Uh-huh.
if you pick any of these guys, somebody that you care about, Fabi, right? Who made it all the way through to the finals and lost the final match to Kamer. Kamer played great against him in the finals, Jesse. Oof. Um, if you pick like one of these guys that you're into and you follow their story through the event, I think it's a pretty compelling and interesting, story to watch.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, if you're really into one of the players, no, I'm sure. It would be interesting. But like, I don't know, David, what do you think about like the freestyle um organization? Because they were like criticized for being like too focused on the drama and wanting to generate drama. And then the guy invited Hans to his next event because he wants more drama. I feel like, well, what are your thoughts on all that?
I mean, so are they accused of also partly doing the war with FIDE to generate more drama and more talk or not? Or is it not
Well,
that
I mean,
far?
I believe the guy Buettner just has openly said like I just want more drama.
I
Like
do want
normal
more
chess
drama.
tournaments are so boring. They should be all about drama, drama, drama.
Mhm.
So it's kind of like, you know,
I mean, me, the best drama in a chess tournament is people playing really well. Like the best drama is on the board, right?
yeah, I
Um,
think they're talking about it different.
but I don't, as long as the chess doesn't suffer from him trying to set up, this story arc or this player or whatever, I don't have I don't have a big problem with that. And honestly, my experience of watching the tournament, that wasn't like a big deal. I mean, to me, the drama is, is Magnus still the best, right? Is like, how can Fabi do? Like, where did Kamer come from? Is he really this good? Um, what is the special thing that he has that makes him relatively better at Fisher Random? Could somebody else learn that or harness that, right? Tragic story. My boy Gukesh was terrible at Chess 960 Kostya. They needed to sub him out for somebody else. It was a bloodbath. I was just crying every day. Um, but as far as inviting Hans, I mean, I think Hans, with his current position in the chess world, he's a natural person to invite as far as his chess level and as far as, how many people are going to be curious about who can beat who, right? Because part of the point of a chess tournament is that you wonder who's going to win, right? That's why, you put tournaments in 200-point rating gaps in the US and stuff like that, right? It's to create an event where the players don't know who's going to win or lose, the people watching don't know who's going to win or lose. That's the drama for me, right? And Hans fits in that sense, right? You don't know how well he's going to do in this event. So he's a reasonable inclusion. Overall, despite the accusation of drama, so to speak, I think the tournament is run with formats that are extremely conducive to interesting chess drama, the kind that I care about, right? Like I love that they've got qualifiers, versus the Sinkfield Cup, which just invites, the same Berlin draw experts again and again, right? Like I love the qualifiers. I love that they got a lot of the top players and a lot of the top juniors. I love that they have the match format, but then you keep playing for fifth place and seventh place and quarterfinals and all that. Honestly, I think it's super interesting to watch. So overall, their organization is doing a great job on like format and which players are in there. I mean, they had a great selection of players at this first tournament.
Yeah. Well, I agree. I mean, Han's an interesting choice because Well, yeah, people want to see how he does. People are very curious in how he performs.
Yeah. And I think also that's linked to their qualification thing as well, right? Because he won this Grenka Open last year that was supposed to give him a spot in a Grenka Elite round robin this year, which is now not happening. And instead, Grenka is making a link with Freestyle, and they're running a huge Freestyle Open tournament
Hmm.
that's going to qualify one player to the Paris Freestyle. And so they said, okay, this other event's not happening. Let's give Hans a spot into an elite event that we have this like link or relationship to now. So I think that was reasonable. I, in general, think that round robins in all formats of chess should be taking people who've won open tournaments instead of just random people off a rating list.
So, David,
Yeah.
just to understand the rules, like you get 5 tournaments this year. I'm
Yeah.
looking at their page. It's a little bit hard. I can't click on anything though. Uh,
Yeah.
how many tournaments do you get to play, for example? Like how many tournaments will Magnus play in this event? I assume it's not all of them.
I don't know. I mean, they've got a pretty elite club. So I would guess that some of the top players will play 4 or 5 of the 5 events.
But if you're doing a
But I don't
thing
know actually.
where like, there's going to be points won for every event, you kind of have to allow either you play all 5 or you get to play 4 or whatever. But like
Right.
if somebody doesn't get to play, then they're kind of shot for their
Yeah.
little point system at the end of it.
Yeah, then they would just have to do well enough in the events they play to get invited to more of them next year or something, right? Like they'd have to claw their way in. But no, I agree for like a parity and integrity of an event. If they wanted to really have the end of season standings mean the most, then the people who are sort of in should all be into the same number of tournaments, right? They should all play 4 out of 5 tournaments or something and rotate through them. Um, but
Also,
I don't know. Sorry.
I want to say their website is not good, dude. So I'm there right now and I'm trying to decipher some basic questions such as who's going to play in Paris. Don't see it.
Hmm.
How do people qualify? Don't see it. You know.
Hmm.
So does
Yeah.
I don't know, as a fan, it's really hard. I can see that they're going to play the US and then Delhi and then South Africa at the end of the year, but I don't get to click on the event and see like how do you get into this event? How are the points decided? What's at
Yeah.
stake? I don't know. I can't figure it out.
Yeah, well, I mean, what's at stake is who's the best chess player in the world
No, but
and
you know what I
like
mean.
$4
Like,
million dollars or
but I
$5
would
million
want to know
dollars.
like how does Hans get in? How do these other people get in?
Yeah.
It's definitely elitist that way. Somebody, this guy's a gatekeeper, and he's like, "Well, Hans, I like you, buddy. Why don't you come on in for, a minimum of 7,500 or whatever, you know?" But
Yeah.
that doesn't feel fair. And like, yeah, I want to know like that basic question of how it's set up. Yeah, well, as a fan, if I was interested, I would be like, "Yeah, tell me how it is." And you don't even know, David. You don't
Right.
even know either, buddy.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Though I would say your accusation about fairness is pretty misplaced since by even having qualifiers, it's more fair than basically any other events that are out there.
But it's very hard to understand
It's
the
not like you could go
qualifiers.
qualify for the Sinkfield Cup or Wake on Zay.
True, but I mean, you could qualify for the world championship. And
Yeah, I
this
mean
is
they're
what
trying to
this,
be a world championship. They're not.
yeah,
We're not comparing it to like
Mm,
day,
yeah.
right?
yeah.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
So for me, it's like it's
Yeah.
just new. It's very new. So as usual, I'm skeptical because it's new, and it's like I think things have to be around for a while before I can trust them as becoming
Mhm.
pillars of the chess community.
Yeah.
Also, another basic thing would be, especially if it's going to exist, is a club like St. Louis would do maybe it wouldn't just be all this guy. There would be
Right.
different 960 events being hosted in different places, kind of like the way you have Vaikanze or Tata Steel or something like that, right? There would be perennial tournaments that some club or somebody
I
hosts.
mean,
Yeah.
St. Louis does do the 960. They do a yearly 960 event in
Yeah.
September.
They
Kasparov
just
has been playing last couple of
Right,
years.
I
they just
know.
call it
Speaking of
like
champions
9
in
9VX
960.
or something, right? So
Chess
it's
9LX.
Chess 9LX, right? So it's just yet another name and easy to miss that it's the same
Yeah.
variant. Here's my little sum up, Jesse. I
Okay.
don't know if the next event's going to be better or worse. Like I don't have the sense to tell you whether, the novelty will wear off or whether they'll build on what they've done, right?
Mm-hmm.
I have no sense of the direction this is going. So I'm not trying to prognosticate at all.
Mm-hmm.
The CEO of the Freestyle Tour told me that they tripled their eyeballs from like the GOAT challenge to this Vice and House event,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that they're happy with that result, and they've got more to do, et cetera, but that they're happy with the viewership that they got for this event. And myself as a chess fan, watching this event made me more interested to watch the next event because it wasn't a walk in the park for Magnus,
Mm.
right? And because there were two guys, Sindarov and Kamer, who had these surprising results that made me more unsure of what's going to happen, more interested to see what happens next.
Mm-hmm.
So just me personally as a viewer, my interest has increased to watch the next event, but I don't know if I'll be, a small minority or part of a wave
Yeah.
or if it'll be stable. I can't say at all.
I definitely agree with you that the swan song of Magnus is a very interesting thing going on. And for me, it'll be that Norway chess where we're going to get the kind of like in terms of rating on the line, it's going to be the only time that you have these two guys at the top, Naka and Magnus, with their epic ratings, that they're just going to be ready to be stabbed. Ready to be stabbed by these young kids, man. Woo,
Yeah.
buddy. Yeah.
Yeah. And I heard, Jesse, on that note that Gajewski apparently said in public that it's very important to Gukesh because Magnus is playing in that event to
Yeah.
get super ready
Yeah.
and bleed some of his rating
That's
from
right.
him.
That's right. Yeah.
Nice. Go Gookie.
Okay, you
Yeah.
guys, that was good.
Got it.
All right, so we're going to leave you there, everybody. Remember that if you want to support our podcast, you can do so by joining our Patreon, and then you can send us, I don't know, $2 at a time and earn the rights to, vote on what topic we'll cover next or suggest topics to us, ask us questions, and so forth. And just most importantly, help keep the podcast going.
All right. I